Before anything, there was nothing. No sun to warm the day, no moon to haunt the night. There was no earth, no sea, no sky full of stars. Imagine a silence so profound it was not even silence, for there were no ears to hear it. Imagine a darkness so complete it was not even dark, for there were no eyes to see it. This was the beginning of things, a time before time itself had begun to tick. It was a state of pure potential, a vast and empty stage waiting for the first actors to appear. In the stories the Old Norse told, this was where it all started. It began not with a word, but with a collision. It began with fire and ice. The universe, they said, was born from a paradox. It was born from two opposites, two elemental forces that should have annihilated each other, but instead created everything. On one side there was the realm of endless biting cold, a place of mist and frost called Niflheim. On the other, the kingdom of eternal, searing fire, a land of lava and soot known as Muspelheim. Between them lay only a great gaping void. This is the drama at the heart of creation. It is a story not of gentle unfolding, but of violent elemental struggle. The ice from Niflheim crept southward, and the fire from Muspelheim reached northward. They met in the middle of the great emptiness. The fire licked at the ice, and the ice began to melt. Steam rose, and from the dripping, venomous meltwater something took shape. This was not a gentle birth. It was messy, chaotic, and utterly unplanned. From the dripping, venomous meltwater in the center of Ginnungagap, a shape began to form. It was not a god, nor was it human. It was something older, something more elemental. The drops coalesced and grew, taking on the form of a giant. This was Ymir, the first of all living beings, the ancestor of the fearsome frost giants. He was immense, larger than any mountain, and his nature was as chaotic as the forces that created him. Ymir was not good or evil, he was simply primal. Ymir was not alone for long. While the giants were being born from his body, another life form emerged from the melting ice. This was a cow, a creature of immense size named Audumla. For 3 days she licked. On the first day, the hair of a man appeared. On the second day, his head was uncovered. On the third day, the entire being was freed from the ice. His name was Buri. Buri was the first of the gods. He was beautiful and strong, a being of order and purpose in contrast to the chaotic nature of the giants. Buri would have a son named Bor, who in turn would marry a giantess named Bestla, the daughter of one of Ymir's descendants. Their union was a critical moment, a mingling of the divine and the gigantic. They had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 brothers were different. They were gods, yes, but they were ambitious. They looked at the chaotic world with the brutish giant Ymir and his monstrous offspring, and they saw not a home but a canvas. They decided that the universe needed to be shaped, to be given order. The 3 brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve, knew they could not build a world while Ymir lived. The great giant was a force of pure chaos, constantly spawning more giants from his body. So the brothers made a hard decision. They resolved to kill their own ancestor. In a terrible world-shaking battle, the 3 young gods fought the ancient giant. They were stronger, quicker, and more cunning. They defeated Ymir, and when the great giant fell, so much of his blood poured from his wounds that it drowned almost all of the other giants. Only 2, a male named Bergelmir and his wife, escaped on a wooden box. With Ymir dead, the brothers had the raw material they needed to build a new world. His corpse was unimaginably vast, and they dragged it to the center of Ginnungagap. This is where the grim, creative work began. They took his flesh and used it to make the earth. The solid ground beneath our feet, the soil and the clay, was once the flesh of a giant. It's a powerful, gruesome image. Our world is built upon the remains of the first living thing. They used his blood to create the oceans, the rivers, and the lakes. The great deep sea that surrounds the land was once the lifeblood of Ymir. They took his bones and crushed them to make the mountains and the rocks. The towering peaks and jagged cliffs that define our landscapes are the shattered skeleton of the first giant. Finally, they took Ymir's massive skull and set it up high above the earth to form the dome of the sky. To hold it in place, they assigned 4 dwarves, named Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Westri, to stand at the 4 corners of the world and support the heavens. Then Odin took sparks and embers that still flew from Muspelheim and tossed them up into the sky, where they became the sun, the moon, and the stars. They took Ymir's brain and threw it into the air, where it became the clouds. The world was built, but it was not yet safe. The gods knew that the surviving giants were their enemies and would always seek to destroy their creation. So they needed a fortress, a place of safety. They found Ymir's great curving eyebrows and used them to build a massive wall around the central part of the earth. This fortified realm they called Midgard, the Middle Yard or Middle Earth. It was the world of humankind, a protected space nestled between the heavenly realm of the gods, Asgard, and the chaotic outer lands of the giants, Jotunheim. The world was beautiful now, with its green earth, its blue seas, and its sky full of stars, but it was empty. Odin, Vili, and Ve were walking along a seashore one day when they found two pieces of driftwood that had washed ashore. One was from an ash tree and the other was from an elm tree. They were just lifeless logs without spirit or purpose. The gods looked at them and decided to give them the greatest gift of all. They decided to create beings in their own image, to populate the world they had so carefully constructed. The age of humanity was about to begin. Odin, the All-Father, was the first to act. He breathed into the two logs, and in that breath he gave them the gift of life and spirit. Vili then gave them the gift of consciousness, of intelligence and understanding. Finally, Ve gave them the gift of the senses. The two logs were now fully formed, a man and a woman. The man they named Ask from the ash tree, and the woman they named Embla from the elm. They were the first humans, the ancestors of all people who would ever live in Midgard. The gods gave them the entire world of Midgard to live in and to fill with their children. Ask and Embla were given a world born of violence and chaos, yet protected and gifted with life, consciousness, and wonder. Their story is a reminder that in the Norse view, humanity is not an accident. Now let us leave the world of gods and giants, of fire and ice, and travel to a different kind of origin story. This one does not begin with a yawning void, but with a point smaller than a single atom, smaller than anything we can possibly imagine. This point was not empty. On the contrary, it contained everything, all the matter, all the energy, all the space, and all the time that would ever make up our universe was compressed into this infinitesimally small, incredibly hot, and unbelievably dense singularity. This is the beginning as told by science. It is a story not found in ancient poems, but in the language of mathematics and physics. Around 13.8 billion years ago, for reasons we still do not fully understand, this singularity began to expand. This was not an explosion in the traditional sense, like a bomb going off in a pre-existing space. It was the expansion of space itself. This event is called the Big Bang. In the first fraction of a second, the universe inflated at a speed that defies comprehension, growing from a subatomic size to something larger than a galaxy. It was a moment of pure, raw energy, a state of such extreme heat and density that the familiar laws of physics did not yet apply. As the universe expanded, it also began to cool. In the first few minutes, the temperature dropped enough for the fundamental particles, quarks and electrons, to begin combining. They formed protons and neutrons, the building blocks of atomic nuclei. For the next 380,000 years, the universe was a hot, foggy soup of these particles, a plasma where light was constantly scattered and could not travel freely. The universe was opaque, a glowing fog much like the misty air of Ginnungagap. Then a critical moment occurred. The universe cooled enough for electrons to be captured by protons and neutrons, forming the first stable atoms, mostly hydrogen and helium. Suddenly the fog cleared. Light could now travel freely across the cosmos for the first time. This first light is something we can still detect today, a faint afterglow of the Big Bang called the cosmic microwave background. The universe became transparent. For millions of years after the Big Bang, the universe continued to expand and cool. Gravity, the silent, invisible force, began its patient work. It pulled together the vast, thin clouds of hydrogen and helium, drawing them into denser and denser clumps. As these clumps grew, the pressure and temperature at their cores skyrocketed. Eventually, the cores became so hot that they ignited, triggering nuclear fusion. The first stars were born, blazing to life in the darkness. These were the forges of the cosmos, the places where new elements would be created. The universe was no longer just hydrogen and helium. These first stars were massive and lived short, violent lives. They burned through their fuel quickly and then died in spectacular explosions called supernovae. These explosions were not just endings, they were also beginnings. They scattered new, heavier elements, carbon, oxygen, iron, all the ingredients necessary for life out into the space between the stars. It was a cosmic recycling program. The ashes of dead stars became the raw material for the next generation of stars and for the planets that would form around them. Our own solar system, our sun and our Earth are all made from the remnants of stars that lived and died billions of years ago. About 4.5 billion years ago, one such cloud of gas and dust, enriched with these heavy elements, began to collapse. At its center, our sun ignited. The remaining material swirled around it in a flat disk, and over millions of years, this material clumped together to form the planets, including our Earth. The early Earth was a hot volcanic world, a far cry from the blue and green planet we know today. But as it cooled, an atmosphere formed, and liquid water delivered by comets and volcanic outgassing created the first oceans. The stage was set for life. No one knows for sure how life began. Perhaps in the warm, shallow waters of the early oceans or in deep-sea volcanic vents. Simple chemical compounds energized by lightning or solar radiation began to form more complex molecules. Eventually, one of these molecules developed the ability to replicate itself. From that first self-replicating molecule, through billions of years of evolution driven by natural selection, life grew in complexity. It evolved from single-celled organisms to plants, fish, insects, dinosaurs, and finally to mammals. In a remote corner of this vast universe, on a small rocky planet, stardust had learned to think. Consciousness was born. When we place the Norse creation myth alongside the scientific theory of the Big Bang, we are not looking at two competing answers to the same question. We are looking at two fundamentally different ways of understanding our origins, each with its own language, its own purpose, and its own truth. The Norse myth, with its giants and gods, speaks the language of symbol and metaphor. The Big Bang theory, with its quarks and quasars, speaks the language of observation and mathematics. One seeks meaning, the other seeks mechanism. Both, in their own way, are trying to make sense of the overwhelming fact of our existence. The similarities between the two stories are striking, almost poetic. The Norse tale begins with Ginnunga Gap, a vast, yawning void of pure potential. Science begins with the singularity, a point of infinite density containing all potential. The Norse universe is born from the violent clash of fire and ice, Muspelheim and Niflheim. Our scientific universe is born from an event of unimaginable energy and heat, which then rapidly expands and cools. The body of the giant Ymir, the raw, chaotic matter of the early universe, is slain and then organized to form the world. The primordial plasma of the Big Bang, a chaotic soup of particles, is organized by the laws of physics and gravity to form galaxies, stars, and planets, but their methods are worlds apart. The Norse myth is a story. It was passed down through generations, told around fires on long winter nights. Its truth is not meant to be tested with telescopes or particle colliders. Its purpose is to give human beings a place in the cosmos, to explain the grand forces of nature in terms of personal, relatable beings, angry giants, wise gods, a cosmic cow. It is a story that explains not just how the world was made, but why it feels the way it does, full of struggle, beauty, and danger. It is a truth for the heart. Science, on the other hand, builds its story from evidence. It is a narrative that is constantly being tested, refined, and even rewritten as new data comes to light. The Big Bang theory is not believed because it is a good story, but because it is supported by a mountain of observations. Its truth is a provisional one, always open to challenge. It is a truth for the mind. In the end, what do we learn by comparing a 1,000-year-old myth with a 100-year-old scientific theory? We learn that the fundamental questions do not change. Where did all this come from? How did we get here? What is our place in the grand scheme of things? Whether we are a Viking longship builder or a modern astrophysicist, these questions resonate deep within us. They are part of the human condition. We are meaning-seeking creatures, living in a universe that often seems vast, indifferent, and silent. And so we tell stories to fill the silence. The Norse gave themselves an origin story that reflected their world. It was a world of harsh beauty, of dramatic contrast between fire and ice, summer and winter, order and chaos. Their universe was personal. shaped by divine will and giantish fury. Our scientific story gives us a different kind of place in the cosmos. It tells us that we are not the center of the universe, but inhabitants of a tiny planet, orbiting an average star in an ordinary galaxy, one of hundreds of billions in an observable universe. It tells us that we are made of stardust, the recycled atoms of long-dead stars. This can feel humbling, even frightening. But it is also a story of incredible connection. It tells us that we are quite literally children of the cosmos. And so we continue to ask. We point our telescopes to the heavens, searching for the echoes of the first light. We dig into the earth, looking for the bones of our ancestors, and we tell stories. We tell stories of Ymir and the Big Bang, of Ask and Embla and the long chain of evolution. We do this because to be human is to wonder. It is to look up at the night sky and feel a sense of awe, to feel the pull of the great unanswered question of our own beginning. The stories may change, the language may evolve from myth to mathematics, but the deep, abiding need to understand our origins remains. It's the oldest quest we have. Fade to black.